No one's ever referred to him as the big guy, especially if they've seen him naked. Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. The Church McGowan mandate. Get it on. And welcome to special one-on-one with a guy I've been wanting to talk to for a little while. Tony Bobulinski. Good to see you, Tony.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
All right. So let me just set the table for people who may not know the official particulars on Tony Bobulinski. I was made aware of him, seeing you interviewed about 2 years ago on the Tucker Carlson show as Hunter Biden's business partner, along with Joe Biden's business partner and Jim Biden's business partner. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd like to say the Biden family. That simplifies it.
The Biden family, Hunter the son, Jim the younger brother, maybe about 7 years younger than Joe, so I've read. And you sat down to weave a tale that was very interesting about the Bidens, the Biden family, governments, foreign governments, corruption, and grift, essentially, trading on the Biden name. And I found you to be very, very credible because you had all the dates and all the names and all the info at the tip of your tongue. And I thought, this guy's an accurate guy, which is good when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to question whether their veracity, for instance. Mark Garagos would say you would make a very good witness.
I appreciate that, yeah. And if you're going to accuse the former sitting vice president and his family of corruption and influence peddling, you better have your facts straight and be willing to define them for people. And I was more than happy, as I said, on that Tucker Carlson interview. There's thousands of documents and chats and text messages and recordings that back up everything I'm saying. So
before we get into all of that, and there's a lot to get into, and I'll preface it by saying something I've said before and I've told you off the air, which is the Biden family is interesting to me because that's the president of the United States. More interesting to me is the way the news outlets and big tech and everyone sort of circled the wagons and reacted to you and the FBI and other security agencies. That to me was more interesting. So we'll get to that, or scarier in its own way. We'll get to that in a second. But I thought first, since we have a nice long format here, where you're from, what did your family do, what did you do, what brought you to that place where you're here today?
Okay, great. And actually, just if you don't mind, a follow-up point to what you just outlined, what you feel the bigger story is relative to the actual suppression of the facts going into the 2020 election. You have a large listener base, and I just want to put their mindset into the right frame of mind. The 2020 presidential election was decided by 21,500 votes. Out of 156 million votes cast for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, the election was decided by 21,500 votes across 3 states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. So if 21,500 people had been given the facts on this information, and there's all these polls out there that say people would have voted differently, just 21,500 of them had changed their vote and voted for Donald Trump, I believe this country wouldn't be in the mess it is today. So I just want to set that framework for your listeners, because we're 20 days from a huge consequential election, and everyone should get out and vote however they deem appropriate, but they should get out and vote. And that's why I'm sitting here with you and willing to come on your podcast. So
yeah, to put a finer point on that, and Chris can look it up, but Tony may know it. They have done polls with Biden voters, and they said, if you had been aware of this information before the election, would you have changed your vote? And a high percentage, I don't know if it was 30% or somewhere in that neighborhood, Chris will look it up, but a high percentage of people said...
Very high percentage. I think it was in the high teens, and if you translated it to number of votes, it was in the millions, if not tens of millions of votes, yeah.
Right. It wasn't a high percent, like 80%. It was a high percent in numbers it would have translated into when you only need 21+ thousand votes. Yeah. This would have been into the millions. All right, so
me.
You.
Okay. So I'm the son of a naval officer. My mom and dad both went to Penn State, actually got married there. And my dad spent his entire career serving this country 25 years plus as a naval supply officer. So I was actually born in Portsmouth Naval Hospital and in Virginia, obviously the largest Navy base in the world, and then moved around every 2.5, 3 years. And funny enough, my dad ended his career at the War College in Norfolk, and so I ended up going to high school in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and was lucky enough to have the best wrestling coach in the country as my high school wrestling coach, Keith Lawrence, and wrestled on a state championship team, was a team captain in Virginia. And because I had done that, I was recruited by a variety of colleges, and then I ended up going to Penn State for college and wrestled there. Very proud of that. Especially proud of the fact that they've won 9 national championships in the last 11 years. Their wrestling program right now is just second to none. And you have guys like David Taylor, who just won an Olympic gold medal in Tokyo last year. So couldn't be more proud of the fact that I wrestled at Penn State.
Yeah, no, look, I'll jump in. I've said it many times when I'm looking for employees. I love a wrestling background because I love the discipline that it takes to cut weight. Just that alone is insane. But I look for military or I look for organized sports, and with the emphasis on something like wrestling, because I believe those people have higher character and a better work ethic. But so I didn't know about your wrestling career, but that speaks more to of who you are and
it was a huge part of my life. That's why I bring it up. Funny enough, Herschel Walker was an inspiration to me when I was a teenager, training to win a state championship and then ultimately going to Penn State. It's been an inspiration to me for 20 plus years, and so I'm excited to see what he's doing in Georgia. But very disciplined, obviously cutting weight and training at the highest echelons. At Penn State, everyone was a 3-time state champ. So to get in the starting lineup there, was difficult. I ultimately was a team captain my senior year, and very proud of that. But you bring up the military. Funny enough, my brother, a 28-year naval flight officer, also went to Penn State on a ROTC scholarship. He was 2 years ahead of me, and because I was studying mechanical engineering at Penn State, the Navy had gotten contact with some of my professors and then ultimately me, because I was doing very well academically there, and they recruited me to basically get a commission upon finishing Penn State and becoming an instructor at Nuclear Power Training Command. My understanding is they picked between 23 and 25 individuals on a yearly basis to go directly from college to Naval Nuclear Power Training Command. And to your point of discipline, I'd encourage your listeners to look in and understand that Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, and not because I was there, but you can easily Google this and do your own research, is considered the most elite academic environment in all of the military, Air Force, Marines, Navy, Army, and stuff like that. And it's because you're basically training both enlisted and officers to become engineers on nuclear-powered submarines or aircraft carriers. And you can imagine when you're operating a nuclear power plant, your margin of error is next to nothing. And so I signed a contract with the Navy while I was a junior at Penn State. And then when I graduated from Penn State, I was commissioned as a ensign in the United States Navy. And I then went to their version of boot camp for direct input officers. And then I went to Naval Nuclear Power Training Command. And at Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, I was an instructor for 2 years. I was a master training specialist, and I taught electrical and nuclear engineering, both on the enlisted side and then ultimately the officer side. And just for your viewers to understand, nuclear power school is where pilots who are going to be commanding officers of aircraft carriers, they're first a pilot, then they come back through nuclear power school to qualify to be an engineer and operate a nuclear power plant, which drives the catapult on aircraft carriers and basically a small city on the water. And so I was an instructor, loved doing that. And then Strom Thurmond, the senator in South Carolina, fought real hard to get nuclear power school moved from Orlando, Florida to Charleston, South Carolina. And they moved the school, and I transitioned from being an instructor into being their chief technology officer. So at that point, I got a Q clearance, the equivalent of a top secret clearance, and I operated the command's classified networks because obviously all the information we're dealing with is highly classified details. And I did that for 2 years and enjoyed it very much. And when I left Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, the Navy gives us a fit rep every year. And my final fit rep I got from my executive officer, who was Commander Crossley at the time, and my captain, who was Captain Brandhuber. I was ranked the #1 direct input officer in the entire command when I walked out of those doors.
Well, the reason I wanted to set the table with that, and by the way, just to circle back, the Media Research Center shows that 16% of Biden voters would have changed their vote if they had been aware of the laptop and the contents thereof. So we're saying this stuff makes a difference. Now, there's two ways you can tamper with an election. You can go break open a ballot box and steal ballots, or you can stuff ballot boxes, or you can do an even more effective way of doing it, at least an easier way of doing it, which is taking 16% of people, which would have been millions of votes, and keeping information from them. So that's a big story. And the reason I wanted to set the table with wrestling and naval officer and all that is because, I wanted people to understand who you were with security clearances, work ethics, education, and love of country as well, and not just some guy who partied with Hunter Biden and was some ne'er-do-well, because that guy could be telling the truth as well. But the chances are, I think, when somebody has your background, you tend to be a little more accurate. And anyone who's...
Well, my understanding is Hunter Biden was kicked out of the Navy for cocaine use. So you can stack my naval career against Hunter Biden's any day of the week.
That is true. I forgot about that. All right. So we'll fast forward to the part where you're an entrepreneur.
So I transitioned out of the Navy in '99. I went to work on Wall Street covering technology companies because of my background. I have an undergrad in mechanical engineering and an MS equivalent in electrical and nuclear engineering. And in '99 was the big tech heyday. So I went to cover technology companies for a bank owned by Citibank at the time. And then I quickly transitioned out of that to work for a large family office in Florida, basically investing their money in private and public companies. And then transitioned from that family out here to Los Angeles in 2003 to work for one of the wealthiest families in the world as their chief investment officer, basically investing their money and my money in a variety of public companies, private companies, things as early stage as two guys in a garage, venture capital, to as late stage as companies that were, cash flowing billions of dollars. And in that career, I basically invested all over the world. I've been in over 50 countries, and that's sort of what led me to this venture, because in my investing around the world, I got introduced to a guy named James Gillier. James Gillier is former British Special Forces and involved in their intelligence community, and we got introduced by mutual friends, and I had known James Gillier for over 10 years when he first bridge the discussion of getting involved in this venture with the Chinese company CFC and the Biden family. And that was circa 2015.
So we'll keep a little bit out of chronological order, but Joe Biden explaining that he's never discussed business with his son Hunter seems kind of dubious to me. But and the reason I always say it is because I always say if my son had a soft swirl ice cream stand in Pasadena, I would discuss his business with him, no matter what the business is. That's what fathers do, but especially this kind of business. I think we have a little montage of him not discussing business with his son, but you were there for a lot of this, so you might be able to rebut some of it. Chris, do we have that?
I mean, the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you're going? This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia.
Gentlemen, I want to stay on the issue of race.
You have to be kidding.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position, knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you?
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
I said that.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so how do you know?
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be
investigated, I guess, is where we kind of, I would have left that on. But either way, so how many times were you personally on an airplane or in a room or a restaurant with Joe Biden?
So I just want to address one thing you brought up because I find it interesting. I use it when people ask me questions or in an analogy. If Hunter Biden and Jim Biden were running a lemonade stand in the middle of California and they were doing millions or tens of millions of dollars of business, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. They're citizens. They can run a business. When they were doing business with the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Chinese Communist Party, Joe Biden had an obligation as the sitting vice president to know what his sons and his brother were doing. And so for him to go in front of the American people, I was actually at that debate in Nashville, Tennessee, where he gaslit the American people. I think 65 million plus people watched that debate. And I referenced to Tucker Carlson, I think in my first interview, I should have jumped over the wall and made a scene when he did that. I sort of got up out of my chair and walked out. I was just so infuriated that he, after sitting in his basement for 5 days, was willing to gaslight the American people and lie so blatantly about having no knowledge of this. And I think what you're going to see happen in 21 days is I think a different party is going to control Congress. And they're going to get to the bottom and investigate all these facts for the American people. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here. The American people are still being lied to by Joe Biden and the Biden family, the Biden's lawyers, the Biden's White House, about the facts around the Biden's family business ventures around the world.
So, and again, I don't expect Biden to do much other than what he's doing. He's trying to protect himself, his presidency, and his son. It's more, what is CNN up to? And what is Twitter up to? And what's Facebook up to? What's the LA Times and the New York Times? What are they up to? Because I get Biden. Biden's a corrupt politician who's doing what corrupt politicians have done for time immemorial. But what's the LA Times doing? That's the bigger question to me. But we'll circle back to that. You have personally been in the room with Joe.
I have. Oh, so your question on that. Obviously, I met and interacted extensively with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden. I personally met with Joe Biden 2 times. Actually, funny enough, here in Los Angeles, Michael Milken holds the Milken Conference here, which is one of the most attended conferences in the world. I think second, maybe only to Davos. And I was here taking a bunch of meetings, and Hunter, Jim Biden, and Rob Walker had come into Los Angeles to meet with me and also to ask me to sit down with Joe Biden. And I met with Joe Biden at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in early May, the night before he was going to give his moonshot for cancer. He was the keynote speaker at the Milken Conference. So,
what year was this?
This was 2017.
So he was no longer the vice president then.
Correct.
And he walked in through the front door, through the side door with security. Did a motorcade pull up?
He did not walk in the front door. So I actually had gotten to the Beverly Hilton a little bit early, and I was sitting down with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden. And, they just said Hunter said his dad's going to be a little bit late. And his father, Joe Biden, walked through the lobby with a full security detail. Hunter actually got up and said, hey, just give me 10 minutes to sort of read my dad in, prep for this meeting. And then Joe came through the bar at the Beverly Hilton. The odd thing is it was about 10:37 at night, if I recall correctly, 10:40 p.m. at night after he'd flown all the way across country. And I'd ask the Biden family to come on record. I mean, they can dispute the fact that meeting happened or what we discussed during that meeting. I would love for them to come out on record. They've basically just not responded. They haven't denied the meeting ever happened, but they've just basically blacked it out. That meeting happened. The challenge for the media was in that meeting, it was only me, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden and Jim Biden. So actually, when the Wall Street Journal was doing their work in October 2020 for an article on these facts, the challenge they were having is, obviously I was verifying the meeting, and I had numerous text messages and other information that demonstrated I was at the Beverly Hilton, I was meeting with Joe Biden, Hunter and Jim. Jim and Hunter themselves referenced the meeting. I thanked Joe for his time and stuff, but the challenge was they couldn't get any of the Bidens to go on record and confirm that meeting happened. That meeting definitely happened, lasted about 45 minutes to an hour. Joe Biden talked about, his family background, his evolution in the political world. I talked about my background, my military background, my father, my brother, both my grandparents. He claims to respect veterans and stuff like that. So as a vet, I would appeal to the Biden family. I would ask them to come out on record and deny or confirm that meeting happened, even though Joe was a private citizen at that moment. So I don't know why they wouldn't be willing to confirm it. And then the next morning, I was a guest of Joe Biden's at his keynote speech at the Milken conference. I sat at the VIP table. I think it was just me and Michael Milken for most of the show. And then Joe Biden's team, took me backstage after he was done. And I walked with Joe Biden out to his motorcade that was waiting for him. So it was probably a 15, 20-minute meeting. We just did small talk because there were people all around. And then, he basically said, in summary, hey, listen, I appreciate everything you're doing. I trust you with my family. Look after my son and brother. And he got in a car and drove off.
What kind of guy is Jim Biden, and what kind of guy is Hunter Biden, just purely personally?
A detail or just a quick word description?
Get into it as much as it's going to take. We got time.
Yeah. So funny enough, after I walked Joe Biden out to his motorcade, I went over to the Peninsula Hotel and sat in a cabana on the rooftop with Jim Biden for a couple of hours. And in that meeting, that was really my first extensive interaction with Jim. And in that meeting, he basically walked through his role, how instrumental he was in Joe Biden's original Senate campaign and getting him elected, how he had raised money and, was out shaking hands. And he sort of outlined his role in the Biden family and Joe's political career all the way through, 8 years as a sitting vice president. And, he's a sort of an aw shucks guy, not very serious. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just sort of, easy to talk to. But while he was walking through this whole evolution, and based on the facts that I was aware of what the Biden family had done in 2015 and 2016 while Joe was the sitting vice president of the United States, I sort of looked at Jim. Remember, I held a Q clearance in the United States Navy, worked in one of the most elite, I believe it to be the elite academic environments. We handle classified information on a daily basis. And in my Q clearance acceptance, I had to sign documents that basically obligated me to disclose on a yearly basis if I received any gift or had any interaction with a foreign national from Iran, China, Russia, and received a gift. I think the bogey was like $50 or $100. So I have that as my backdrop, listening to Jim Biden talk about this stuff. And my question to him was, how are you guys doing this? Not from a criminal perspective, but from a political buzzsaw media perspective, right? Meaning, you're talking about doing business with one of the largest private companies in China, CEFC. You've been doing business with them since 2015, 2016. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars exchanging hands, and ultimately them deploying billions of dollars into this business that I set up, ultimately called Sinohawk. And I looked at him and basically said, how are you guys doing this, thinking about it? This seems a bit crazy for you. Not for me. I'm an individual private citizen. I have no political ties. Nobody in my family's, in any political position. I can do business all over the world. But how are you guys doing this? And he just sort of chuckled and looked at me and said, plausible deniability. I just can literally picture his face doing that and processing that. And then we moved on to other discussions. But I think that sums up Jim Biden.
What about Hunter?
So Hunter, an interesting individual. When James Gillier And Rob Walker had made me aware of this in sort of 2015 and 2016. They kept trying to get me to get involved, right? Because they needed somebody with, business experience, structuring deals, and basically holding the Chinese accountable for what they were claiming they were going to do. And so I was aware that Hunter had gotten kicked out of the Navy for cocaine use. James Gilliar sort of dismissed that, give the guy a chance, sit down with him, hear his story, and Rob Walker sort of the same ilk. And just for your audience, Rob Walker, grew up in Arkansas, worked in the Clinton administration, and basically was a close confidant of the Biden family for a decade plus. His wife worked for Jill Biden for over 7 years while they were in the White House as the vice president. And so, Rob and James Gilliar both were saying, hey, just give Hunter a chance. Sit down with him and, hear. And so I sat down with him, actually, funny enough, for the longest period of time on the patio of the Chateau Marmont, that same time frame before I had met Joe Biden. And, Hunter told me his version of, the Biden family and the role that Hunter had played in it and some of the businesses he had been doing for, the past decade around the world. And, people ask, well, listen, all this stuff on this laptop, I had nothing to do with the laptop. All the facts and information I provided to congressmen, senators, the FBI was all originated myself. Had nothing to do with the laptop. But a lot of people point to the laptop and sort of some of the disturbing information on that. I'd ask the American people and all your viewers, just put that to the side. There's much bigger things to focus on. And so when I sat with Hunter, he wasn't high. He was, could hold a conversation, came across smart enough, knew exactly what he was doing. And, we exchanged lots of messages, met in different places around the world, New York, Romania. We're supposed to meet in Monaco. And I would just say, apparently when he wasn't struggling with the issues he had, he was calculated, aware, and focused. And at that time, he was focused on money and making money.
What was the rationale, if any, of these guys being involved with these companies? I mean, obviously people know they didn't have a background in energy or many of the endeavors they were involved with. So, I mean, I'm not an investor. I'm not a Wall Street guy. But if you need somebody in your camp, they either need to have some expertise in the field of the business, or they need to have a bunch of money to invest, or they need to be connected. Correct. And the connection part is the only avenue that makes sense here because, they've interviewed Hunter Biden and they've said, what do you know about natural gas companies in Ukraine? And he said, I don't know anything about it, right. Which is pretty damning because why do you need a guy who doesn't know anything about the company or the subject the company focuses on involved with the business and getting paid? But could you make an argument for them being there for reasons other than access to Joe Biden?
You can't. You can. And anybody listening to this interview, you cannot. The value that Jim Biden and Hunter Biden, in their own words, don't take my word for it, review all the documents I produced and other business partners have produced, and Jim Biden, in his own words, saying, what I'm bringing to the table is the Biden family. Well, who's the Biden family? What did Jim bring to the table? He was bringing his brother to the table, the sitting vice president of the United States. Hunter, well-educated, I think a law degree from Georgetown and Yale, was of counsel at Boy Schiller. He could try to obfuscate it that he was bringing legal expertise. But Ukraine, China, Romania, Russia, Kazakhstan, we're not talking about Canada, Britain, Australia. Let me say those again. Ukraine, Russia, Romania, Kazakhstan, and China were the leading countries they were doing business in. And what were those businesses looking for? They were looking for access in information and what Joe Biden and the Biden family could bring to the table.
Well, give us a practical scenario. I'm one of these countries, and I have Hunter Biden and Jim Biden sitting across my mahogany desk in my lavish office, And obviously, Jim and Hunter can't do jack squat for me, but the dad and brother can, Joe Biden. What is an actual realistic ask that a guy like Joe Biden could do for many of these entities?
Okay, so I'll use CFC, which was the Chinese company that I was working with and interacted with extensively.
Are they an energy company?
It's a well-documented. This is a company that was headquartered and based in China, mainland China, not Hong Kong. A company that in 2009 was doing approximately $50 million in revenue. In 8 years, that company grew from $50 million in revenue to $37 billion in revenue in 2017. To just give your audience a reference to the magnitude of this company. And that company was controlled by two individuals. Obviously they had a board and an executive team, but the main people that we interacted with was an individual named Chairman Yi, who ran the company, and an individual named Director Zhang. Now, I know your audience or the American people are looking for some black and white, a video of Joe Biden picking up a duffel bag of cash behind a car. That's not there. You're talking about China, Russia, Ukraine. All the parties involved knew how delicate this information was. A lot of the information that your team has here and has been made public, you can actually see in that communication, and those communications were never expected to be made public. James Gilliar, how he talked about it. Hunter, Jim Biden, Rob Walker. They didn't call Hunter Hunter. They called him H in emails and stuff. So they tried to obfuscate in their communication. Once again, this communication was never expected to be made public, and they were still focused on doing that. So let's talk about the Chinese, CFC. CFC initially approached the Biden family, Hunter specifically, in the fall of 2015. Why is that important? The fall of 2015, Joe Biden had publicly announced that he was not going to run for president in the next cycle. Oddly enough, around that same time, you had multiple people approach the Biden family from CEFC. They were either advisors of CFC or people acting as surrogates for CFC. And if you do any research on CFC, I just gave you the magnitude of the scale of that company operating from China, and they were looking for influence in Washington, D.C., in the United States, and maybe even more importantly, they were looking for influence around the world. And so what did the Biden family bring to them in 2015 and 2016? They worked, Hunter Biden, James Gilliar, Rob Walker, helped CFC by using the Biden name around the world in countries like Oman, Luxembourg, Romania, Kazakhstan, to help CEFC further their financial interests under, you could reference it as sort of one belt, one road.
That's the Chinese plan of going into other countries and buying land and not taking them over, but sort of financially.
You can call it loan to own. They make loans to a variety of countries, very well documented, to high interest, very leveraged loans that they anticipate they ultimately will own whatever they're loaning against. And in 2016, James Gilliar, Rob Walker, and Hunter Biden did extensive work using the Biden name around the world to benefit CEFC.
But what practically could the Bidens, or more importantly, Joe Biden, do? I mean, what is there a policy? Is there?
Well, there's phone calls. There's relationships. Remember, it's not just Joe Biden. Joe Biden, as a sitting vice president of the United States, has a variety of a huge team, actually, hundreds of people that work for him, that are ambassadors, that have influence in these countries around the world. So it might be as simple as Hunter Biden calling the Romanian ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Romania, and talking about his partner's interest in Romania and the need of help in a meeting or influence or to demonstrate a relationship to CFC. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, we're not going to, it's not the kind of thing where he says, I'm going to pass a bill that says this company doesn't have to pay taxes in America or something like that. There's not a lot of straight lines. Like when you talked about, there's no grainy video of a duffel bag of cash being dropped off. It's more sophisticated. It's more nuanced, but it's understood that the name is important and that it has a currency to it. And that's why you would pay Hunter or Jim Biden. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother peeling them off any cash because they'd be of no use to your company otherwise.
Correct. And just to highlight that, so you sort of got to put your Chinese business cap on or your Kazakhstan business cap on. Joe Biden simply showing up and shaking somebody's hand is a demonstration of relationship and power. The value of that to these companies, they use that then to their advantage. They can demonstrate that when Joe Biden and Hunter Biden flew to China on Air Force Two, that Joe took the time to meet Jonathan Lee. And, even if it was for a 5-minute coffee, then Jonathan Lee can take that information. And just so your audience knows who Jonathan Lee is, Jonathan Lee was the individual running Bohai, Rosemont Senate, the partnership between, Hunter Biden and a variety of other partners and a Chinese capital and stuff like that. But that simple meeting, a 5-minute coffee and a handshake, is all Jonathan Lee needs to make huge inroads politically and capitally within the walls of China. So it's not like Joe is taking 7 days out of his time and going on a vacation. It's a 5-minute meeting, an hour dinner at Cafe Milano, a 30-minute phone call, a document in helping somebody's kid get into college. All of those actions are easily leveraged by these a variety of business partners.
And you said the countries we're talking about, some of the bad actors on the world stage, and it's not Canada, it's not Sweden. Why is it that those countries need to be validated by a guy like Joe Biden versus Canada that doesn't, or a Canadian company?
Yeah, so for your viewers, I've done business all over the world, and what I would say is in countries like a China or Romania or Kazakhstan, there's gray areas in things that we consider black and white in the United States when it comes to, fraud or what you can do politically or different things. In a lot of these countries, there's a gray area. It's fascinating to me, just to make a point. So you have Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, right? Lieutenant Colonel Vindman became a famous individual because he testified in an impeachment hearing against Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, all based on his expertise in Ukraine. Where's Lieutenant Colonel Vindman right now? It's well documented that Hunter Biden and the Biden family were doing business with Burisma, a gas company in Ukraine, and Lieutenant Colonel Vindman states that he understands the corruption in Ukraine and focused in on cleaning it up. I think he even wrote a book that your team can pull up. Where's Lieutenant Colonel Vindman right now? These facts have all been verified on what Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and the Biden family were doing in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania, Russia, China. Where is he? Going on CNN talking about, we need to look into these facts.
Yeah.
It's a one-sided approach. And so to your point, these facts are well documented, and anybody that wants to dive into them and connect the dots on these countries, they easily can do it. So,
can you address, back to Ukraine, can you address, there's the famous footage of Joe Biden sort of bragging that he wanted the prosecutor, whatever the term is for over there, the corrupt prosecutor pulled off the case essentially, and if he didn't do it, then we'd hold a bunch of financial funding to the Ukraine, and he's sort of boasting about it. And I've heard both sides. One side said, well, that looks like he's trying to use American influence and his influence to get this guy off his son's case in Ukraine with Burisma. The other side would say, no, that guy was corrupt and he deserved to be fired.
So just for your audience, so they're aware, I had no involvement with Burisma or the Biden business that they were doing in Ukraine. But based on the facts and interaction I am extremely knowledgeable on, I believe President Trump was asking Zelensky to do exactly what he should have done, which was to, hey, look at this. There's a bunch of data points here that don't make sense. Could you please have your team investigate the Biden family and what they were doing in Ukraine? And if everything was copacetic and fine, great. Maybe President Trump could have used some slightly different words or the way he phrased it, but everybody latched onto that and literally impeached a sitting president over him asking a foreign government to simply look into what he believed. And there were plenty of data points to imply it was worth looking at. Corruption in Ukraine.
Viktor Shokin, former prosecutor general of Ukraine.
Yeah, and so you had Viktor Shokin looking into Burisma's founder, Shlozevsky.
You can find that clip, by the way, Chris, of Biden sort of boasting that he would be out of there in 7 hours if Viktor wasn't shit-canned, and he'd blow a call into Obama. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, so that video's been made public where Joe basically threatens, to withhold, I believe billions of dollars. It may have been hundreds, if a prosecutor wasn't fired. And that prosecutor just happened to be looking into the business that Hunter Biden sat on the board of. So just based on those data points, any logical person would say, hey, we should look at that and try to understand all the facts around that. And that's not been done. It's basically been obfuscated, or different people have not covered it and stuff like that. I believe that's ultimately going to be looked into, and the American people will be educated on the facts. And then they can decide whether they care or, it doesn't matter to them.
Well, again, Biden's doing what Biden's doing. What's CNN doing? What's the New York Times doing?
Well, hopefully Jake Tapper's getting prepared to interview me for an hour in front of his audience, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
Well, that's the other thing. You've been interviewed long form by Tucker Carlson on 2 occasions, first just a few weeks before the 2020 election, and then just a couple of weeks ago, about 2 years later. And you would think other media outlets would pick up and your phone would be ringing off the hook, but your phone is not ringing. I've not seen you on any other outlet, which is the other part of the story. Part one is Biden being corrupt, but in a way that's kind of passé. It's like, yeah, so like many other politicians have come before. And as I've said, the more interesting is the part two. What's the media's involvement in this, or lack thereof? I have found when the media gets onto something like Steele dossier or something, when it's sort of an offensive thing, they go hard. They go hard and they go all out. They pin their ears back and they go for it. When it comes to people like you, they just go radio silent.
Right.
They could go, oh, this guy's full of shit. But then the next question would be, tell us why, and why don't you have him on your show and interview him? And they're not going there. They're not going to do that. It's like I've said a million times, when Fauci was trying to get everybody vaccinated, and he was basically saying it's kind of the Trump voters that are the ones that are fighting us the most. Well, then go on Tucker Carlson and explain to his audience why they need to be vaccinated if that's the audience that is not getting vaccinated, according to you.
Right.
But he never shows up on Tucker Carlson. And the answer is because Tucker Carlson is going to poke a lot of holes in a lot of the stuff he's done, and he doesn't want to go there. So he goes back onto MSNBC and talks to Joy King for the 33rd time about vaccinations. But that audience is already in the pews.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well,
we'll play the clip for you. Sorry. This is the clip from was it 2000 and what year is this clip from? Chris can look it up. This him talking. This is Biden talking about Joe Biden talking about Viktor Shokin.
It's got to be 2015 or something.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to.
This is 2018, the article says. But we'll look somewhere else.
The interview when Shokin got fired had to have been 15 or 16.
Well, we have trouble with the internet sometimes, but we'll see if we can figure that out.
Well, the statement was from 2018.
Yeah, it could have been an interview. I think he was talking about a previous occurrence in 15 or 16.
Now that makes sense.
But just for your audience and your listeners, imagine seeing that, and you're the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump. He had an obligation to the American people when he's getting fed all these different data points to understand, was there corruption in Ukraine? Were things being nefariously done?
Yeah.
And he asked for that, and they basically roasted him for that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But
but let me talk to that. Because this argument comes up a lot. So people go, Trump was just doing that to help himself in his bid for a re-election. And the answer is yes. And then the other answer can be, but it can also be true.
Yeah, they both can be true.
They can both be true. And his motivation, I mean, you could say there was a lot of that surrounding COVID, like, oh, you just don't want the businesses closed down because you own a small business. Yes, that's true, and I think it would be very bad for our society.
Right.
They can both be true. I can be that's your personal interest, true, and it's also things the American people deserve to know.
Right.
And I think the way our media spins everything is like he just wanted that for himself. True, and then also it could have happened, and we have the right to know.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% on that. And then sort of to go back to your position on the media. If I had my wishes, the media would just do their job and I would become irrelevant in this story because all these facts are extremely well documented in emails, text messages, voice recordings, phone calls, WeChats, WhatsApp. So a investigative reporter could sit in a room. They don't need me. They don't need other business partners that are willing to come forward or are going to be forced to come forward. They can connect all the dots on this activity and cover it. They blacked this out for the American people. It's funny because I hear people say, "Oh no, they didn't." You could find your interview on with Tucker Carlson. Yeah, you could find it if you were aware of it and you searched and dug into it. But the American people were gaslit by the media in October 2020, and they continue to be gaslit by the media outside of people such as yourself or select, or Fox News and stuff like that. And for your viewers, they can go do research. But, I would love for Jake Tapper to come off the bench and say, Tony, listen, be in New York next week. I'm going to sit down with you for an hour. And the role that Jake Tapper, am going to play is I'm going to play the devil's advocate. And I'm going to spend the hour trying to poke holes in everything you said. I actually look forward to it because I just want to be clear because there's been a couple of media outlets that have said, oh, well, we reached out to Tony. People have reached out to me trying to get me to go on a 3-minute hit or a 5-minute hit or to verify a story because some new announcement on Hunter Biden. Because they want something, they need something. They're worried about the media cycle. What I'm appealing to you, and I can't thank you enough for taking 2 hours today to give me a forum to spend enough time for your audience to walk through the facts, because this isn't a simple story. There's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of facts that your audience can start to put together. But the media has blacked it out. They continue to black it out. And that's why I'm sitting here 20 days before what I believe is the largest midterm election I've seen in my lifetime.
Well, and let's talk about the media, because I get into this all the time. You go, well, there's Fox, and then someone will go, yeah, Fox does their thing and CNN does their thing. So it's kind of evens out or cancels each other. They're both doing what they do. And I go, okay, but there's also a batting average. CNN all through COVID wanted schools shut down, wanted businesses shut down, wanted churches and salons and everything shut down. And Fox was more of the keep the schools open, don't shut the beaches down. So, yes, they had opposing opinions, but one of them turned out to be correct.
Well,
Number one, but let me finish this thought. It's not Fox versus CNN. It's Fox versus CNN, LA Times, New York Times, ABC, USA Today, PolitiFact, and Wikipedia, and Newsweek, and Reuters, and the list just goes on and on and on. CNN, by them lonesome, by themselves, can't black out your story. But where's ABC? Where's NBC? Where's 60 Minutes? Where are all the other major news outlets? It's a cabal that have all colluded to black it out.
Well, I agree, and it's the most blacked out or suppressed story in the history of a presidential election for our country.
Well,
and not because I was involved in it. You can go do the facts, but I want to address that thing.
These same outlets, just did 4 years of Trump in Russia and his family, and how his daughter was having knit caps manufactured in China, or that Russian folks came to the Trump Plaza and had a free lunch. They were the same people screaming about this nepotism for 4 years.
Imagine what they did to Donald Trump Jr. for, I think it was only a 30-minute meeting in Trump Tower. They talked about that meeting. He was deposed for, I think, 14 hours over a 30-minute meeting.
Right. So this is the media.
And this is actual, factual, tens of millions of dollars changing hands between the Biden family, Russia, Romania, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and China. This isn't hypothecating. These are bank records that senators and congressmen and the DOJ and the FBI have. Compare that to a 30-minute meeting that Don Jr. had in Trump Tower and the coverage and the absolute just pounding on the American people's psyche relentlessly. But I want to actually go back to a point. Fox News. I've seen it, and I'm sure your team can pull it up, whether it be a Tucker Carlson or a Laura Ingraham or a Jesse Waters or a Sean Hannity. They cover a story, but they offer the opposing view the opportunity to come on their show and debate what they are claiming to be fact. I haven't seen CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC go, well, hey, we don't think that Hunter laptop's real, or, hey, that Bobulinski character, we don't think is very credible, but we'll give him the opportunity to come on 60 Minutes for an hour, if he's willing to, and demonstrate to the American people how credible he is. Or CNN. The good news is that CNN is, I don't know if your audience is aware of this, but basically Discovery merged with Warner Brothers, and that is run, that new company, Warner Brothers Discovery, is run by an individual named David Zaslav, and he hired Chris Licht to run CNN and come in and basically focus on turning CNN into the news organization it was 30 years ago and 20 years ago. So I actually am still holding out hope that in the next 20 days that I'm going to get a call, or my team will get a call from Jake Tapper's team or Wolf Blitzer, and they say, hey, listen, we're ready to basically, debate you on these facts. Here's the date and time to show up, and I will be happy to come to New York. I'll make it as easy for them as possible. I'll fly to New York on my own dime. They won't have to cover a single cost, and I will enter that room of battle for an hour, and they can debate my facts.
More with Tony Bobulinski in a moment. First, let me tell you about Good Ranchers. Store-bought meat can be scary with bacteria and ghoulish prices. Recently, 44 tons of meat was recalled. Yeah, you recall that. Trade in spooky store-bought meat for peace of mind with Good Ranchers. They deliver America's best meat and seafood year-round. Their October feast special, well, it just got better. Up to 4 pounds of meat free. Order any box and get over 2 pounds of their better-than-organic chicken breasts free. And if your order is more than $300, you'll also get 2 pounds of Wagyu ground beef, too. Oh, so good. Head to goodranchers.com/Adam to claim your special October feast for 4 free pounds of meat today. It's Good Ranchers, right, Dawson?
Good Ranchers lets you save $25 on every box and lock in your price when you subscribe. Put an end to your meat buying nightmare by visiting goodranchers.com/Adam to get over 4 pounds of high-quality beef and chicken. The real monster isn't under your bed. It's in your fridge. Take control over your food with an October feast from Good Ranchers. American meat delivered.
Well, you know, it's comical. It made me smile, chuckle. CNN, you know, the way you pose it, and it's kind of true. Like, have Tony on and do battle with him. Why do they need to do battle with you? They're a news outlet.
Right.
You know what I mean? They would only need to do battle with you if they were a mouthpiece for the other side, which they are, which is a pretzel they should have never bent themselves into.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, there's the news outlet side of it, and then you get into the FBI side of it, and that's when it starts veering into sort of dark water for me. If you can have these guys sort of weaponized in one direction or the other politically, that's not a country you want to live in, and it's historically kind of the beginning of the end. You want to right that ship.
It's scary.
It's
scary for it. I don't care what you believe in politically. If we can't rely on the FBI to dot I's and cross T's equally, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, or nothing, that they apply equal justice, we have much bigger problems in this country.
So the Hunter Biden laptop came out. It's going to be one of those October surprises just weeks before the election. I think it was the New York Post that wrote the article on it, Miranda Devine. And they wrote a pretty thorough article about it. And it was at that point that the FBI and big tech was activated. They needed, I don't know why they feel compelled to do this, but they felt compelled. That was a call to action. So Twitter took it off their platform, and Zuckerberg, we have the clip, of course, of him on Joe Rogan, where he's lying in that when really smart guys who run companies go, yeah, something like I can't recall. That usually means when smart people are confused or can't recall stuff, it usually means they just don't want to lie into a microphone. But I guess the FBI came to him and said, hey, this thing's coming and we need your help.
Right.
And we'll play the clip.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like, there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
Yeah, we have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. I mean, basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Yeah. Was there a follow? Didn't he follow it up with something?
Yeah, we have the follow-up too.
Oh, sorry. We'll do the follow-up.
Yeah, it'll take a second here.
So, I mean, I think while they're loading that, your viewers should pay close attention to the words he used. He used the term dump.
Right.
He didn't say, we think there's a story or a single article or there might be some information. He used the term dump, and if you watch the video, he catches himself using that term and then sort of like is figuring out, did I just say more than I should have said? Because the FBI was well aware of the laptop. They were well aware. Now, a single document wouldn't be called a dump, but 160,000 emails and hundreds of thousands of text messages would be called a dump. So I caught that. I think it's fascinating the wording he used.
Also, there's a signature, there's a receipt with Hunter Biden's signature on it that the guy who owns the laptop repair place provided. So I could never figure out when the FBI said it had all the earmarks of Russian collusion, why they weren't able to suss that out. It's a laptop. It exists. It's been handed over. Right. Why so confusing?
Well, I think we need to differentiate. So for one thing, I would basically appeal to all those agents out there that work for the FBI that are basically putting their lives on the line for our country on a daily basis. And they've seen wrongdoing done. They're coming out of the woodworks to Congressman Jordan and Congressman Comer, Senator Johnson and Grassley. I would appeal to those people because they're unfortunately, when somebody references the FBI, they all get painted with the same brush.
Yes.
So there's a handful of bad actors that I think is all going to be proven, not dissimilar to the Russian dossier and all that nonsense that was pounded into the American people. But all you people, all those FBI agents out there listening to me, I appeal to you. If you've seen something nefarious around these facts, please come forward. You're protected as a whistleblower and demonstrate to Senator Johnson, Senator Grassley, Congressman Jordan, Congressman Comer, the facts that you know. Now, I think what you're referencing, Adam, is the 51 Intel officials. Those were all former FBI, CIA, three-letter agencies that came out and basically signed a letter on October 19th. So if we have the time, I'll actually walk through what was going on that time, okay?
Yes.
When the New York Post broke their article, I was actually on the East Coast. Sadly enough, my sister-in-law, my brother, who was a 28-year naval flight officer, his wife was dying of cancer. So I was over there dealing with family issues. I woke up the morning the New York Post had broken that story. My phone batteries were dead because my name was in that story, right? And up to that point...
Had you done the Tucker interview?
I hadn't done anything.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't done anything. I was still...
You did it shortly
I was
after
still
that.
a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Through my business career, because of the families I worked for and the highest levels of confidentiality when you're working for some of the wealthiest people in the world, I didn't have any social media presence. I wasn't giving interviews. I basically was a very quiet private investor, and I was a ghost before the New York Post broke that article. And my name, full name, and my email was on that. So you can imagine I woke up to, after my phones got charged, to hundreds of emails of, we're going to burn your house down, welcome to Islam and, repent and just crazy stuff, threatening my family, threatening me. But that was the week, I want to say that they broke that story on October 14th, 2020. Let's walk through the next week because it's very important for your audience to understand that. On that Friday, October 16th, Adam Schiff, I think it's kind of ironic. I'm sitting here in your Glendale studio, which is actually within the
district.
Yeah, which is in Adam Schiff's district. I find it ironic and amusing. But on that Friday, October 16th, Adam Schiff went on CNN and Wolf Blitzer and basically accused indirectly my family, myself, as being a Russian plant and being a stooge of the Kremlin. And all of this information.
We have that clip.
Do you want to play it?
Yeah. Let's watch Schiff.
The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Does it surprise you at all that this information Rudy Giuliani is peddling very well could be connected to some sort of Russian government disinformation campaign?
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son.
Take a look at this picture of the president in the Oval Office holding up a copy of the New York Post touting this conspiracy theory. It's made its way all the way to the commander-in-chief with a big smile on his face.
Yes. Well, look, I think we know who the driving force behind this smear has been all along, and it's been the president and the Kremlin.
All right, but first things first. What shall we listen when they have another idea? I mean, once they got to pipe up, whether it's about Russian collusion or COVID, shall we be listening to these people? And then what's Wolf Blitzer's role in this? Why isn't Wolf Blitzer doing an interview? But they're peddling this collusion
Well, I'd
theory.
actually appeal to Wolf Blitzer. Listen, you aired that interview with a sitting congressman, the chairman of the U.S. Intelligence Committee.
So he should know.
I'm a former naval officer, held a Q clearance, and served this country. I bleed red, white, and blue. So why hasn't Wolf Blitzer had me on to tell the other side of that story? Imagine this. Adam Schiff in there referencing that this smear and the emails. Remember, one of those emails, the New York Post only published 2 emails, if I recall correctly. One dealing with Burisma, an individual named Vadim, and the email from James Gilliard to me talking about Hunter holding 10% for the big guy. Adam Schiff that Friday, October 16, 2020, basically accused me of being a Russian plant.
Yes.
Imagine
Is there
that.
any...
Wait. A Russian plant.
Well,
my grandfather, my mother's father, served this country for 37 years as an Army intelligence officer, spoke 6+ languages. My mom grew up all over the world. My other grandfather served this country. My dad served this country for 25+ years. My brother for 28 years. Me for 6 years. And you have the head of the Intelligence Committee in front of the American people basically accusing me of being a Russian plant. Now, I've never met Rudy Giuliani in my life. I've never interacted with him, shared information. I have nothing to do with that laptop or Rudy Giuliani. And here we are in your studio in Adam Schiff's district, and it's been 2 years. He hasn't reached out to me. His team hasn't reached out to me to say, hey, listen, I know there was a lot of heat around that election. You live 5 minutes or 10 minutes from me.
I'll tell you what to do. Tell him you were around the Capitol on January 6th, and he will reach out to you. I guarantee they've reached out to anyone who has a neighbor who may have been there on the 7th.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
That'll get him to reach out to you lickety split. Oh, we'll get the FBI rolling
I should
on
take
your
that
ass.
approach.
Yeah, and the reason I was smirking as you were going through your family's very distinguished service to this country is if you disagree with these people, you're either a puppet of Putin or a racist. Yeah. That's just the new world order. Yeah. They have 2 bags. They either grab racist if you disagree with them on whatever it is, and sometimes they'll grab racist, and sometimes they'll grab Putin's puppet, and with Donald Trump, they went for both bags.
Right.
But that's the new world order. You disagree with Wolf Blitzer and CNN, and that's who you are. And these people just go in front of cameras all day long and talk about, I mean, according to Adam Schiff, 23% of this country is working for Putin.
Right.
It's insane. But walk us through the timeline again.
That's Friday, October 16th, 2020. Obviously, an election a couple of weeks ago. Away. Adam Schiff accuses me and my family of being Russian plants or part of some Kremlin smear. Sadly enough, the next morning, my sister-in-law passed away from cancer. And so I was dealing with all of that chaos. And I didn't actually know Adam Schiff had given that interview until later that afternoon on Saturday, October 17th. When I saw that interview, I was irate. Because, remember, I hadn't come public. People were simply aware of me because the New York Post had published an article. So I had multiple discussions with James Gilliard, Rob Walker, some of their advisors through that weekend. On Sunday, October 18th, I had a discussion with Rob Walker that lasted a little over 10 minutes where I basically said to him, listen, Rob, Adam Schiff went in front of the world accusing me of being a Russian plant and part of some Kremlin smear. If you don't get Joe Biden's campaign, George Mazier's Hunter's lawyer, to get on the phone with Adam Schiff and simply have him retract that statement, I, come Monday, October 19th, am going to go on the record and publicly disclose all the information I have. Important. Let me reiterate that. On Friday the 16th, Adam Schiff goes in front of the world.
The article drops on the Wednesday.
the Wednesday.
Friday, Schiff goes
Schiff's telling the world I'm part of a Russian Kremlin smear and a Russian plant. Over that weekend, I'm having heated discussions with James Gilliar, Rob Walker. They're having discussions with George Meziers, Eric Schwerin, the campaign. On Sunday morning, I basically tell Rob Walker, if he doesn't retract that statement by this evening, Sunday, October 18th, I'm going on record Monday, October 19th with all the facts. I think your team has as a reference, but in that recording, Rob Walker goes, Tony, you don't want to do that. If you do that, you're going to bury us all. Sunday, October 18th. What happened on Monday, October 19th? All of a sudden, Politico releases a letter from 51 former Intel officers, 4 former heads of the CIA, FBI, NSA, NSC. The credentials on that letter is just staggering.
Yes.
It didn't just happen.
2,000 years of security clearance.
Insane. And guess what, Adam? Not a single one of those individuals, their staff or their lawyers, before publishing that letter, reached out to me. My email was published in front of the world. They could have simply said, hey, listen, we're just verifying. Is that email real? Can you produce the metadata for it? What is going on? Not a single one of those 51 individuals reached out to me. Why? Because if they had, it would have shut down that letter. And that letter was used to basically blackball, blind, suppress, whatever you want to call this story in the eyes of the American people, because then all the other news outlets latched on to Politico's statement. They didn't read the letter. The American people didn't open up and read a 10-page letter with 50. What they latched onto was the headline. 51 Intel officials claim this is all Russian disinformation. So if you're a tax-paying citizen in the middle of Nebraska worried about taking care of your family, sending your kids to school, and creating a good life, are you opening up that letter? No, you're reading the headline. And
Yes.
Politico published that headline, and it was used by the Biden campaign. Remember what happened 4 days later. Joe Biden was in Nashville, Tennessee for the second debate against Donald Trump. And in that debate, he specifically says to Donald Trump, that's all Russian disinformation. 51 former Intel officials, 4 former heads of the CIA said that is all bogus. That's Russian disinformation. He basically lied and gaslit the American people, and Politico and those 51 former Intel officials enabled that to happen because what I believe is in their mind, they viewed Donald Trump as some existential threat.
Yes.
And so they would do, imagine this. Imagine you put your life on the line for this country and you serve this country in the highest intelligence agencies for 40 years, and then you were willing to put pen to paper and sign every ounce of integrity you have onto that letter claiming this is Russian disinformation.
Well, here's my thought on that. Is it okay to lie? Well, if you're in the French resistance, then you forge your paperwork, and when the Gestapo comes by, you try to pass yourself off as a German, cobbler or something. So you go, is it okay to lie? Is it okay to falsify things? Is it okay to do this? And the answer is generally no, but nobody blames the French resistance for lying, essentially, and doing what they did. The problem is the real problem is who's assessing the threat. So those people said Trump is Hitlerian and he's a Stalin-like dictator, and this country will burn to the ground if he does a second term. Well, if that's true, then you'd be a fool not to sign this document. Right. But the question is, and this is where the American people and the media come into play, how about you let us make up our own mind?
Exactly. We are not Iran. We are not China. We are not North Korea. The American people decide who the sitting president and the next president of the United States is. That's why we are the greatest country in the world. But the FBI had their responsibility, the big tech companies. Imagine going back to Mark Zuckerberg, his reference to the dump. He's on Joe Rogan, highest respect for Joe Rogan and his podcast. And, he gives people a couple hours to basically walk through things similar to you. But he just nonchalantly says, we throttled down that story and, people could still see it. But, and then Joe asks him, well, do you think it had an impact? And he said, well, it might, he dances around
He did a thing, we'll play the clip where he was like, well, it may have impacted some of the eyeballs. And it was like, no, substantially. We'll play it.
We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less.
A little bit.
Fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But I mean, but basically,
right, that's a smart guy lying.
So
meaningful.
So interesting points in there. He tries to deflect and say, hey, we made a mistake and we were bad, but we weren't as bad as Twitter.
Right.
Look at Twitter. And you have Jack Dorsey basically publicly coming out in front of congressional hearings and saying, we were wrong. We made a mistake. We shut the New York Post down. We should have never done that. I don't know. I think you guys have that clip if you want to play that.
We do.
Yeah, we made a total mistake with the New York Post. We corrected that within 24 hours. It was not to do with the content. It was to do with a hacked materials policy. We had an incorrect interpretation. We don't write policy according to any particular political leaning. If we find any of it, we route it out.
So I actually applaud Jack Dorsey. In front of congressional hearings, he was willing to admit we made a mistake. But what he doesn't talk about is the New York Post was locked out of their Twitter account for over 2 weeks. So they allowed the sharing, but they basically shut down a big piece of it. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg. Joe Rogan's questions were great because he kept pushing him down. He didn't move on to the next question. And Mark Zuckerberg himself says the suppression that Facebook executed on was meaningful. Remember, we started this interview for your audience. The election was decided by 21,500 votes across 3 states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. So they should call Mark Zuckerberg today and say, will you define meaningful? Do you think you impacted millions or potentially tens of millions of voters that you were basically withholding these facts from?
You can, I'll give Chris a minute to find the debate thing where Biden was talking about the 51 Intel experts. And that's the new gaslighting that's going on in our society. Somebody, I can't tell you how many times someone has said, PolitiFact says that never happened. So they let out a statement. They're very biased. And now you're going to take this out and you're going to trot it out as if it's gospel.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you bring up PolitiFact because the PolitiFact summary on the facts that I've provided is a joke online right now. So I'd actually appeal to the team at PolitiFact to go online and update their summary of me and all the facts I've provided the American people because it has maturely been confirmed and compounded over the last 2 years from when they originally wrote their analysis.
Well, it's even trickles down to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
When you read the Wikipedia, as I was doing last night, I said, what does Wikipedia have to say about when you go, when the average American goes, what's going on with Hunter Biden's laptop? Let me check Wikipedia. Here's how they describe it.
The Hunter Biden laptop controversy involves a laptop computer that belonged to Hunter Biden, son of then presidential candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden. The Federal Bureau of Investigation seized the laptop after being informed of its existence by John Paul Mac Isaac, a computer repair shop owner in Wilmington, Delaware, who claimed that it had been brought to his shop in April 2019 by a person who claimed to be Hunter Biden. But
be careful when there's a lot of claims in there, but keep going.
3 weeks before the 2020 United States presidential election, the New York Post published a story representing these claims, Hunter Biden's ownership, and some material on the laptop that was allegedly compromising for Joe Biden. The incumbent president and presidential candidate Donald Trump tried to turn the story into a so-called October surprise to hurt Joe Biden's campaign. Other conservative media outlets promoted the story, leading most other major media outlets to also discuss the story. The laptop was of unclear origin and contained emails allegedly from Hunter Biden and other digital files relating to Hunter Biden, some of which were confirmed as authentic in 2022. However, quote, the vast majority of the data and most of the nearly 129,000 emails it contained could not be verified by either of the two security experts who reviewed the data for the Post. PolitiFact wrote in June 2021.
Let's source PolitiFact. Yeah, what do they have to say?
Over time, there has been less doubt that the laptop did in fact belong to Hunter Biden, concluding that the laptop was real in the sense that it exists, but it didn't prove much, as nothing from the laptop has revealed illegal or unethical behavior by Joe Biden as vice president with regard to his son's tenure a director for Burisma.
PolitiFact says nothing burger. Okay, so that's what I'm getting from Wiki. That's just nothing to see.
So it's an interesting data point because your audience, that was a long-winded summary, but in the last 2 years, there has not been a single email, a single recording, text message that's been released to the public that has been refuted or dismissed as not fact or altered or fabricated. Not a single one.
Yeah, because it's his laptop and everything on it is his.
Every email is real, and I'm happy. Listen, Jake Tapper, pull the 20 emails that you think are fabricated. And remember, I had nothing to do with the laptop. All my facts and information is separate. But there is crossover because of obviously emails that I was on and stuff like that. So it is, it's gaslighting at the worst extreme. And the American people deserve better. They deserve better. They deserve the facts.
Do we have the article with the letter from the intel groups? This is the most nefarious and scariest part of this whole endeavor. Remember, on Sunday, you're talking about dropping a bomb, and Monday morning,
released this.
They must have got their hustle on.
Yeah.
With this.
I believe it was ready before that Sunday.
In
preparation, knowing that I was having discussions and stuff.
Like Wilford Brimley's obit, right?
Yeah.
Like you get it ready for the old actor before he dies.
Public statement on the Hunter Biden emails from October 19th, 2020. We are all individuals who devoted significant portions of our lives to national security. Some of us served in senior positions in policy departments and agencies, and some of us served in senior positions in the intelligence community. Some of us were political appointees, and some were career officials. Many of us worked for presidents of both political parties. We are also individuals who see Russia as one of our nation's primary adversaries. All of us have an understanding of the wide range of Russian covert and overt activities that will undermine U.S. national security, with some of us knowing Russian behavior intimately as we work to defend our nation against it for a career. A few of us worked against Russian information operations in the United States in the past several years. Perhaps most important, each of us believes deeply that American citizens should determine the outcome of elections, not foreign governments.
Oh, what about intel agencies? How about their affecting? Go ahead.
All of us agree with the Founding Fathers' concern about the damage that foreign interference in our politics can do to our democracy. It is for all these reasons that we write to say that the arrival on the U.S. political scene of emails purportedly belonging to the vice president's son, Hunter, much of it related to his time serving on the board of the Ukrainian gas company, Burisma, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are genuine or not, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement. Just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case.
That's all you need for the headline.
Yeah, and what was the headline?
These guys are experts.
Could you read for your audience the Politico headline?
Yeah, I have the Politico headline. Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say.
Now, could you repeat that for your audience?
Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say.
Okay, so that's what the hundreds of millions of Americans saw and read.
Sure.
They're busy going to work, taking care of their family. They didn't open up that letter that was actually signed and go through 4 paragraphs in that it was they needed that headline. And the week of October 19th, going into the second presidential election in Nashville, Tennessee, where Joe Biden references that letter, was enough.
The second debate.
In Nashville, Tennessee. That letter and that headline was enough for Joe Biden to reference it in front of, I think, 65 million plus people watched that debate, and they then took it as fact. They didn't go down and read that letter.
This is what happened.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
I just got chills. That is the sitting president of the United States. At that point, he was the Democratic nominee. Gaslighting 65 million plus people watching it live, and then tens of millions or hundreds of millions of other people that watch follow-up clips. Basically, latch onto that headline from Politico and that letter. That altered the election. 21,500 votes decided the last election.
Well, is there any question Biden didn't think he was lying there? I mean, who knows better?
Biden knew he was lying.
Yes.
That's why he was in his basement for 4 days before that debate, preparing how they were going to address that question. And did he have the firepower he needed? And they knew that I was coming out on Monday, October 19th, and I was ready to go to congressmen, senators, the FBI, go on Tucker Carlson and stuff like that.
Just because we're on the lying thing.
Yeah.
Going back to 1987, the thing that's funny is people say that Biden is addled and he's weaving yarns and he's kind of lost his bearing. All that's true. But I can show you a clip from when he was 45 years of age. I don't know how old you are, Tony.
I'm 50.
You're 50. Okay. I'm 58. Dawson, how old are you?
I'm 48.
All right. We're all older than Joe Biden was in this clip. And now we chalk it up to him being senile.
Right.
But this is him, younger than all of us, with a microphone, speaking about his academic record.
The new questions stem from taped remarks of Biden during an April campaign appearance in New Hampshire.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
Joe Biden ranked 76th in a class of 85 at the University of Syracuse Law School. I mean, this guy comes off this whole thing as a flyweight.
Now Biden says Newsweek is right. His memory had failed him.
All right. His memory didn't fail him. his memory was firing on 12 cylinders back then. He gave the number of credits he'd accumulated, 163, and explained they only needed 120. When your memory fails you, you go, I don't know, I was somewhere near the middle of my class. I don't recall what the ranking was. No, he was rat-a-tat-tat with stats, numbers, and all the accolades. He's a liar. He lies. He lied back then.
Blatant liar.
He lies now. Is he capable of lying when asked about his son, when he does the montage of I never spoke to my son? Well, as evidence there, I'd say he's perfectly capable of lying.
Yeah. Remember how important that lie was he told in that debate. 65 plus million people watched it. It was 2 weeks before a presidential election that was decided by 21,500 votes. And he blatantly gaslit not only the American people, but the world, claiming that these intel officials had looked and this had all that he knew at that moment. It's actually a great segue. He was well aware of CFC, the Chinese company. He was well aware of the tens of millions of dollars his family had made. And you don't have to take my word for that. You guys have an audio clip where Joe Biden is calling Hunter Biden in December of 2018 because the New York Times was about to break an article that in intimate detail talked about the Chinese, the corruption, Patrick Ho, Chairman Yi, and the business relationship with the Biden family. Not with Hunter, with the Biden family. And that New York Times article, unfortunately, because they were onto something, they just couldn't get the facts they needed to properly publish it. But in that article, they say, we can't confirm whether an actual deal was done between Hunter Biden and CFC. That was December 2018. But the New York Times was getting ready to publish that article, and the Biden family, their lawyers, their advisors, can you imagine how involved they were trying to shut down the New York Times, telling them they were going to sue them? You have no right to claim us. Show us the facts if you're going to claim my family was in business. So Joe Biden was well aware of all those facts when he was in Nashville, Tennessee at the second presidential debate and tried to use 51 former intel officials to obfuscate and gaslight the American people. I think your team has that audio recording that Joe Biden left Hunter in December 2018.
Hey, Palace Dad, it's 8:15 on Wednesday night. If you get a chance, give me a call. Nothing urgent. Just want to talk to you. I thought the article, at least the thing online, that's going to be printed tomorrow in the Times, was good. I think it's clear. And anyway, if you get a chance, give me a call. I love you.
Yeah, you're clear. So that's a dad who knows the son is involved with this endeavor.
So, but more importantly, I would encourage your audience to go out and read that New York Times article that he's referencing. There's 10 data points talking about shoeboxes of cash to the tunes of millions of dollars left for African presidents and prime ministers by the company CFC that was in business with the Biden family, talking about the fact that Patrick Ho, that was detained when he landed at JFK for corruption, called Jim Biden as his first phone call when he was given a phone call. And he thought he was calling Hunter Biden. So imagine you're a father that claims you have no knowledge of your son or your family's business dealings, yet you leave that voice recording for your son after reading the article that was published in the New York Times saying, hey, you're in the clear. He doesn't ask, Hunter, you need to call me right now. I mean, this article's talking about corruption, the Chinese Communist Party, millions of dollars left in shoeboxes of cash. I didn't hear him say that on the voice recording. What I heard him say is, I'm well aware of all these facts. You're in the clear, Hunter, because they didn't talk about the deal that you did on behalf of the Biden family with CFC.
Did again, I know what they're doing. What are all the news outlets doing?
They're not covering it. You could literally have a 2-hour.
Then they're not news
It would
anymore.
violate it. You'd have to call it 120 minutes, not 60 minutes. But you could literally have a show just on that New York Times article and that voicemail that Joe Biden left for Hunter.
What? And I know you were interviewed by the FBI.
I was.
And I want to talk about that. But 10% for the big guy. What was the breakdown financially?
Okay, so you're referencing a famous email that James Gilliar sent to me. He carboned Hunter and Rob Walker on that email. I actually don't even think Jim Biden was carboned on the email. And in that email, May 13th, 2017, James Gilliar, who once again had been working on this in 2015 and 2016, had sent me an email detailing structure, compensation, and how the equity was going to be split up for our side of the business. We were going to own 50% of it. The Chinese or CFC was going to own 50%. And in that email, there's two key points that I'd actually like to point out for your audience. One of them is the 10 held by H for the big guy. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If any of your viewers...
H is Hunter.
Yeah, H is clearly Hunter. And if anybody listening to this or anybody who listens to it down the road still is questioning whether the big guy is Joe Biden, please reach out to me. I will give you all the facts. It is crystal clear that they were talking about Joe Biden. Why? I met with Joe Biden numerous times. What's not in that email are the 100 other phone calls and text messages and emails and discussions around it. So in that email, 10 held by H for the big guy was Joe Biden. And then what happened as follow-up to Hunter, seeing that, he basically had numerous discussions with James Gilliar, Rob Walker about, hey, it's important we obfuscate Joe's involvement. You guys can't be doing that. And then, so what ultimately happened was Jim Biden in that email only held 10%. He was given 20%. So Jim ultimately held 20%. Hunter held 20%. I held 20%. James Gilliar and Rob Walker. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of the evolution that occurred there.
I like to reverse engineer things.
Okay.
When you're talking about an email like this and you're using people's names, and then you stop using a person's name, and you just say the big guy, they're using your name, they're using Jim's name, but they stop with the big guy. If not Joe Biden, who could the big guy possibly be in this equation? Who would this human being be who is involved with this endeavor whose name shall not be mentioned?
Yeah, imagine that show. They should do a 60-minute show is who is the big guy? If it's not Joe Biden, let's walk through all the other channels of who it could be. And unfortunately, all the roads lead back to exactly who it was. It was Joe Biden. Imagine this, James Gilliar. Your team should reach out to James Gilliar. CNN should reach out to James Gilliar. James Gilliar has not gone on record. He could simply go on record and say, hey, listen, I wrote that email. The big guy wasn't talking about Joe Biden. It was talking about Matt Smith or somebody else. He hasn't gone on record in 2 years. Why? Because he's not willing to lie and perjure himself and claim that the big guy is not Joe Biden.
And again, the media's lack of interest in asking any of these questions is sort of the saddest part of this equation for me. So you were questioned by the FBI.
I was. Can we talk about that email for just 5 more minutes, if you don't mind, for your viewers?
Sure.
If you go back and read that email, I think your staff has it. James Gilliar makes a statement in that email where the Chinese were being shortchanged by the Chinese. Now, unless you were involved in this, you would have no idea what he's talking about when he says we are shortchanged. But what James Gilliar was talking about is they had negotiated a deal in 2016, end of 15 and into 16, while Joe Biden was still the sitting vice president, that CFC would pay the Biden family $10 million a year to help them around the world in countries like Oman, Luxembourg, and stuff like that. In 2017, when James Gilliar drafted that and sent that email to me, Rob Walker had already received 2 $3 million wires on February 23rd, 2017 and March 1st, 2017. Senator Johnson and Grassley detailed those two $3 million wires, so a total of $6 million in a report that they made public in November 2020, unfortunately after the election. But CFC had wired $6 million for work that the Biden family had done in 2016 and 2015. And not just the Biden family. James Gilliar was traveling around the world. Rob Walker was doing work. But in fact, to the Chinese, it was always just the Biden family. The other parties, me included, were just there to facilitate and stuff like that. So in that email, nobody's latched onto this. I haven't seen any article written about it or any. What is James Gilliar talking about when he says we are being shortchanged? And what he's talking about is they felt they were owed $20 million for the work they had done in 15 and 16. So we don't have to spend any more time on that, but I just wanted to outline that to your viewers because Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley published I think it's a 70-page report in November 2020 after the election talking about those wires, and they've been attacked and, crucified for claiming they're working with the Kremlin and all. Those are fact. Those are bank records.
Right.
And so I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was appropriate. And then, we can segue right into the FBI if you want.
You were called in to speak to the FBI based on the Tucker Carlson interview?
I was not. When I sat with the FBI, I hadn't done the Tucker Carlson. So let's go back to the week of that 51 Intel official letter that Politico published.
That's
and
a Monday,
used the headline.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that Thursday, I was in Nashville for the presidential debate. Now, some people argue, Tony was just a stooge of Trump. Why was he at the I was invited to go to the presidential debate. I'm a patriot. My whole male family has served this country. It was a great opportunity. I was happy to get on a plane and fly there on my own dime and observe it and basically try to educate the American people on the facts around the Biden family. That night, after that debate, I flew to Washington, D.C. When I went to bed the night before, October 22nd, I envisioned the next morning I was waking up and going to go sit with Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley because my lawyers had provided them the thousands of documents and data points I had. Throughout the evening and the next morning, my lawyers and advisors had interacted with the FBI, and they had concluded it was in my best interest and the best interest of the country that I go sit with the FBI voluntarily. The FBI didn't reach out to me and say, this is crazy, because remember, they were well aware of the laptop. So they had the 10 held by H for the big guy email. They had my name and stuff like that. And my lawyers, it's funny because, and Senator Johnson publicly says this, he advised me not to go to the FBI. And he was right. He basically said, Tony, I don't know who you're meeting with. You can't trust that. Come sit with us. We will do a dictated interview, documented, lawyers, all that stuff, and we will make that public to the American people. My advisors and lawyers said, let's go to the FBI first, and if we have time, we'll go to Johnson and Grassley. So that morning, Friday, October 23rd, I had not gone on Tucker Carlson yet. I had basically given a press conference at the Nashville debate. And so I went and sat with the FBI voluntarily for 5 hours and basically walked through all the facts and information that I was aware of, that I was exposed to, that I had documented. And it was a very interesting experience, the first for me. Obviously, I did it voluntarily. They apologized. The head of station walked me into the interview room. My understanding is the entire interview was recorded. I asked the question. They said all of our interview rooms are recorded. I didn't care. I wanted it to be recorded. I just don't know what happened to that recording. Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley believe that Tim Tebow, the FBI agent that just apparently resigned,
quit,
a couple of months ago. I don't believe that's a coincidence, but that he walked out of the building. He was actually, I'm jumping a little bit ahead. I got walked into the interview by the head of station. He sat two federal agents in front of me, and they apologized that, hey, the people that are really aware of all the facts around this, because remember at that time there was already an investigation going on in Delaware with the U.S. Attorney Weiss and I guess the FBI Baltimore office. And they said, listen, these guys are crazy smart. They'll go through all the facts and take notes. But we're going to have a quick follow-up interview with you where we bring in some of the parties that are heavily involved and knowledgeable on all these facts to make it more productive. So I spent about 5 hours going through basically timelines, meetings with Joe Biden, Hunter, Jim, the other parties involved, the Chinese, showing text messages, showing phone images and stuff like that. Funny enough, in the middle of that interview, Jim Biden called me via WhatsApp. That's been some people think it was him threatening me. How the heck did he know I was at the FBI? I think he might have just mistakenly dialed me. But
when's the last time he called you before that?
I actually spoke to him a couple of weeks before that when Senator Johnson and Grassley had published that their September report that detailed all the Biden family business dealings with the CFC and all that. And that was actually, sadly enough, the first time that I had learned that the Biden family had actually defrauded me. September 2020, almost 3 years after they had actually done it, I found out by reading a report published by 2 senators and a committee. And I'd called Jim Biden and I sent him a message like, this can't be real. You basically defrauded Rob Walker, James Gilliam, and me. And I called Jim Biden. He answered the phone. He was so nice to start. And then I brought up the concerns. And he basically said, go fuck yourself, and hung up on me real quickly. That's when I talked to him prior to him calling me while I was in the FBI. But
did anybody, Jim or Hunter or anybody other than the one discussion you had, did anyone say, hey, man, you don't want to do this? Or would that not be the kind of thing they'd want to leave a paper trail?
No, they clearly. So I referenced that recording from Rob Walker earlier in this interview where he basically said, you don't want to do this. You're going to bury us all.
Right. Well, we can play that recording, I think. But he was. Or do we have the recording? Sorry.
I am providing the facts.
You're just going to just bury all of us, man.
Yeah. So
remember, Rob Walker, there's a longer conversation. Rob Walker was talking to George Maziers, Hunter's lawyer. He was talking to Eric Schwerin, the Biden family partner. He was talking to the campaign. He was having these discussions. And in an aggregate of those discussions, he was begging me not to go public with the facts. But I was not, after serving this country the way I did, and my entire male family serving this country, I was not going to allow Congressman Schiff to basically, mar my family's name around a Kremlin smear and stuff like that. But so to answer your question, they worked for 2 weeks trying to convince me not to talk to the Wall Street Journal, not to go public with this information and stuff.
So the FBI, they don't have the guys in the room who know the facts, right?
Correct. The 2 agents, sharp guys. And at one point, there were as much as 6 federal agents in that room taking notes, asking questions, coming in and out. And at the end of that interview, they walked me out to a car, and basically the head of station had a discussion with my lawyer and basically said, hey, listen, federal agent Tim Tebow wasn't in D.C. or he would have participated in this. Here's his cell phone number. He's going to be running point for all this information and follow-up. Please call him today and follow up. So my lawyers called Tim Tebow the night of October 23rd and had about an hour to an hour and a half discussion about all the information I just provided and what the next steps were. And at that point, when I left the FBI's office, as well as Tim Tebow's discussion with my lawyers October 23rd that night, they were saying, listen, we're quickly going to have Tony come back in for a follow-up interview to get more of these facts and understand all these points. It could be as early as next week, but we're going to definitely have him come back in. And as I shared in my Tucker Carlson interview a couple of weeks, one of the reasons why I've come back out again publicly is because my lawyers and I never heard from the FBI again.
Did you get the vibe at the time that they were just kind of sleepwalking through this, not digging, or what was your kind of takeaway?
Yeah, well, if that the video of that 5-hour interview is ever made public or snippets of it, you would be amazed at the faces these agents were making when I mean, obviously they were well aware that I was talking about the Biden family. You were 2 weeks away from a presidential election, and I was showing them facts that detailed, influence peddling, tens of millions of dollars changing hands. And after they had to pick their mouse up off the floor, and sometimes they would say, hey, hold on, just a second, we need to step out. And they would step out of the room and they would all mingle or go talk to the head of station. And then they would come back in the room and start the interview back again. So they were well aware of the facts that I was outlining it. And I didn't get the impression in that meeting that they were not taking it seriously. I think they were taking it very seriously, and it was based in their facial reaction. What happened to all these facts after the fact? I don't know. I wish, Christopher Wray would come out on record. Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley earlier this week sent Christopher Wray a very detailed request saying, listen, we have multiple whistleblowers that have come forward stating that whether it be Tim Tebow or other parties within the FBI, you guys have suppressed this information that Tony Bobulinski provided to the FBI. Please respond to us. So they're fighting for it. I mean, Christopher Wray could come clear this up very clearly by sending a letter back to Johnson and Grassley and saying that 5-hour interview and the thousands of documents that Tony provided, they have all been provided to the U.S. Attorney Weiss in Delaware. They're well aware of those facts and they're reviewing them. As I sit here today, Adam, with you, I don't know what happened. My lawyers, those senators, congressmen believe it was all just basically suppressed, deleted, put into a black hole.
Are you planning on suing the Biden family?
Interesting question. I have a team. Let's move past it to another discussion. I have every right and standing that I could sue them for fraud, but let's not spend much time on it right now.
Okay. Your last interaction with the Bidens with Jim Biden?
Correct.
And do you think that Joe Biden's going to, I don't believe he's going to try to run for a second term. If the Republicans take over the House and the Senate, a lot of this is going to come out. It all feels, FBI has been looking into the Hunter Biden laptop for 3 years now. They got no conclusions. Joe Biden just turned 80. All of this feels like a incremental can kicking down the road kind of strategy, which is first thing they needed was just 3 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, get that FBI letter, get those 51 intel agents, give them a piece of paper and a document, and we can fool the PolitiFact. Go ahead. We'll fool the American people. We'll just kick the can down the road. Then once it's after the election, and it's kind of funny, the news outlets now are like, well, once the election was done, now we can all kind of slowly go, well, yeah, okay, maybe it's real.
Right.
Maybe it's real, but that's all right. We're in place. Now you can kind of, Biden's 80, his faculties are sort of going, all this is going to trickle out in due time, but we're 2 years in already.
Right.
He's not going to make a second term. Maybe this will just work that he gets a full term in.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because for your listeners and the American people, this story is much bigger than just the Biden family. The reason why this matters, even if Joe Biden decides not to run in 2024 or somebody unseats him, is this is a story of what the Chinese Communist Party is willing to do to infiltrate the highest levels of the United States government. Imagine this. A sitting vice president's family was infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party because Hunter Biden was viewed as low-hanging fruit. Notice they didn't go to Obama. They weren't trying to appeal to Obama's two daughters. I believe when all of this fact is looked at and peeled back, that this is going to have been a Chinese intel operation to infiltrate the United States government at the highest levels. They used capital to do it. They used private businesses to do it, but all with one interest in mind, and that was creating leverage against the American people. So the American people need to be aware of these facts. to understand how we need to fix that for the decades to come. And then second, we're 20 days from what I believe is the most influential midterm election in our lifetime. And I would encourage everyone to look into these facts and go out and vote for one simple thing. Vote for transparency. Vote for facts. And I believe those facts, if the GOP takes control of Congress and they take control of the Senate, are going to be made aware to the American people next year in 2023. And then they can decide if it's time for Joe Biden to ride off into the sunset, whether he's impeached or removed, or that he can run again. Because remember, you pointed this out earlier, elections in this country are supposed to be decided by the American people, not the FBI, not big tech, not bad actors. So the facts and transparency is what you're voting for in 20 days.
Well, the comedy is, especially out here in California, every third time Gavin Newsom opens his mouth, he wants some sort of truth commission so there's not misinformation about X, Y, or Z, which I find comical. The other part of this I found comical is China's got to be laughing their ass off.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
They make all the big moves and all the idiots like Adam Schiff just go, this is more Russia collusion.
Yeah.
Like they're literally just picking another country every time China does something nefarious.
Well, it's funny because the Bidens, I think in their mind, even though Hunter and the Biden family were doing business, some of that stuff has come out this week to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars with Russian oligarchs and different players within it. I think they view Russia as the worst actor in the world, materially worse than China. China dwarfs Russia probably by a factor of 100 to 1 in the damage that they can do and are doing to this country. And if the American people don't wake up to those facts, we're going to become a colony of China in the next 100 years.
Russia can't beat Ukraine in a conventional war.
Yeah.
How big a threat do they pose to us?
Yeah, I actually want to come back, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You know, I've been a California taxpayer for 20 years, and this election in 20 days is just instrumental. And here in L.A., where we both reside and enjoy, you have Rick Caruso running against Karen Bass. Listen, to anybody listening to this, I've known Rick Caruso for 20 years. If you want the same old crime, inflation, and all this gaslighting that's been going on within Los Angeles, vote for Karen Bass. If you want correction, you want crime shut down, you want business, I'm a huge supporter of Rick Caruso and have known him for 20 years. So I just wanted to address that because I live here.
Yeah.
And crazy enough, somebody was shot in the heart of Beverly Hills about 2 months ago, 4 times when he stepped outside of a restaurant. Now, nobody should be getting shot anywhere in this country, but it's crazy what's going on here in our backyard. So I just wanted to hit that if you didn't mind.
Listen, I talked to Dr. Drew this morning, and I'm gobsmacked by California voters and Los Angeles voters. I'm saying to him, look, Karen Bass, you know what you're going to get. Right. Just more.
We got it.
It's more of the same. I don't care how hard left you are. I don't care what a fan of African American women you are or whatever. If you would like more of the same, then do that.
Right.
But we've all decided that nobody wants more of the same. Why not just take a flyer on her Caruso? Anybody. I said to Dr. Drew this morning, I said, Karen Bass is a coach that's 1 in 16 in the NFL for the last 7 seasons. Right. And then you go, well, this guy's an unknown college coach out of the South. Good. Let him try.
Unknown.
Let him try.
Extremely successful businessman.
Yes.
Very smart. Very calculated, and he loves this city, and he loves our country. He deserves a try, an at-bat, and I hope the voters come out strong and support that change for the sake of their safety and their sanity.
Well, yes.
Let's move back. I have one other point if we have the time, because you have Congressman Comer, who it looks like most likely will chair the Oversight Committee. He and his team have been working hard to basically just get the facts on 150 suspicious activity reports that were assigned to the Biden family, Jim Biden, Sarah Biden, Hunter Biden. For your audience, just so they understand this,
Is this the FARA stuff?
Yeah, this is a suspicious activity report. It's called
the financial
it's called a SAR.
one?
Yeah.
Oh, not SAR. It's FARA. Chris, you can look it up. So if you're doing suspicious financial transactions, they will look into this.
Yeah, I'll make it simple for your audience. Everyone listening to this call, I'm willing to bet everything I have, 99.99% of you will never receive a suspicious activity report or a SAR in your entire life. The Biden family received over 150 of them across a couple of years. This is a bank saying, hey, listen, we have Hunter Biden's account, and all of a sudden, $2 million came in from some Chinese entity that we've never gotten a wire from before. This looks odd. So then what does the bank do? The bank reaches out to the individual and says, listen, KYC, know your customer, and compliance, flag this. Can you explain this transaction? If they properly explain the transaction, the SAR is removed. 150 of them across a couple of years.
Jim Biden,
Hunter Biden, Sarah Biden. And they were given, there's actually emails that have been made public on the laptop where the banks gave the Jim Biden and Sarah Biden the right to respond to it.
Right.
And Hunter Biden's money managers trying to get answers. They basically didn't answer them, and the banks ended up closing those accounts. 3 weeks ago, if I believe, Comer and the Oversight Committee held a hearing. 2 hours of it was based on James Comer asking the committee, listen, we're not accusing anybody of doing anything. We're simply asking for this information so we can do our job. Imagine that. Every Democrat on that committee voted against it. And one of those Democrats is Ro Khanna, a congressman from Northern California that has known my family for years. I supported his campaign. My mother and sister supported his campaign. Yet he is yet to come out on CNN, MSNBC and say, hey, I've known Tony Bobulinski. He's been nothing but a patriot. Every time I interacted with him, he operated with the highest integrity and honest, and he supported me. So I'm here to fight for his family. Adam Schiff. There's zero chance that Tony Bobulinski is some Russian plot or Kremlin smearing. I know the guy, I know his family. In that committee hearing, all the Democrats argued this is political, there's no there. Let me reiterate this for your audience. 150 suspicious activity reports across a couple of years from a variety of banks against the Biden family. Your audience, 99.999% of them will never receive a single one in their entire life. So I just wanted to talk about that because we do have people out there fighting for transparency and accountability, and it's important the American people know that.
Remember, Biden launched that campaign saying that he was going to be the most transparent.
Yeah, I would love for the Biden family.
Ever.
Yeah, I would listen. I've enjoyed this. I enjoy. Congratulations, obviously, on all your success. But I would much rather the media do their job and the Biden family come out and offer this transparency to the American people, so I can basically leave stage right and become irrelevant again.
Well, Tony was asked to come on the show because I found him to be very authentic. I think everyone listening understands that wherever you are politically, the information is either accurate or it's not. And you are a very accurate person, which makes me think truthful. Versus Zuckerberg being a little hazy on some of the details. I thank you for your time. There's no plugs for you. You didn't come on here to sell soda. You just came on here because you want to get your story out.
Well, I'd plug the U.S. vets, everyone that served this country valiantly. I thank them for their service, and I'd plug that.
I actually have plugs. I'm going to be in San Diego at my Drop Comedy Club, October 28th and 29th. You can go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows. Tony, thank you so much, and hopefully this will help get your story out there. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Tony Bobulinski saying mahalo.